Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank preview for you of the BZ-75. This is the upcoming Tier 10 Chinese heavy tank that does have access to the new rocket booster functionality. So this is not going to just be a premium exclusive when this tech tree is released, probably in mid to the end of January. And apart from the rocket boosters, this thing has a 152mm caliber gun with 650 alpha damage, 8 degrees of gun depression, and a very thick armor loadout, at least frontally. So before I jump into the gameplay and show you exactly how this feels on the battlefield, let's compare it to some other tanks and run down its statistics. So I've decided that the best tanks to compare the BZ-75 to are the AMX M454 and also the 60TP. Right off the bat, we can see that these guns are not equal in caliber. The BZ-75 with 152 is larger than the AMX M454 and pretty much the same as the 152.4mm that you're getting on the 60TP, but all of the alpha damages are completely different. The BZ deals 650, whereas the 60TP's 152mm deals 750, and the AMX M4 deals 560. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, hold on, QB, I thought that these vehicles were meant to have really big guns. And yes, for a while they were. The BZ-75 was initially slated during super testing to have a 180mm caliber gun that would deal 1050 with its premium Hesh round and 1600 if you could penetrate with a lower penetration round of 75. This would kind of make this thing a lot like the Type 5 Heavy of World of Tanks back in the day, and would have got it to perform a lot like the BZ-176 premium tank that we've seen inside the game. Although one could argue 1050 damage at tier 10 with the same penetration as the BZ-176 currently has at tier 8 might not be as bad as the 800 that people are suffering from with the same amount of pen. Nevertheless, this gun is nowhere to be seen on the test server, and unless Wargaming are planning on adding it, I'll be reviewing this vehicle as it stands currently on the test server, but please keep in mind that it is the first iteration and things are subject to change. So, the BZ-75's 152mm has 258mm of penetration, and if you load heat, you've got 319, which is nice. HE 840 alpha damage for 90 is kind of a little bit underwhelming, especially considering something like the 60TP gets 90mm of pen and 950 damage. And so I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed with the BZ-75's gun when it's got worse DPM than the 60TP, worse alpha damage than the 60TP, and marginally better penetration, but way worse high explosive rounds. And when we compare it to the 560 alpha damage and 10% better damage per minute on the AMX M454's gun, yeah, it doesn't really seem all that impressive so far. The gun handling as well is not good news for the BZ-75. 2.7 seconds aim time is far from impressive, 0.4 accuracy is really bad, and the vehicle's gun handling when moving is 0.2, when turning the tank is 0.2, and when turning the turret is 0.15, which is awful. So this means that you're probably going to want to end up using vertical stabilizers on this tank, or else you're really going to have a good time with trying to tame that gun. And it's crazy for me that this tank makes the 60TP's gun look more like a sniper with better accuracy and much better turret traverse dispersion, and the AMX M454's, which has only got 90 alpha damage less, it looks like it's in a different class. The AMX M454 doesn't really need to use vert stabs, has massively better accuracy, almost as if it's like an accurate medium tank, and the aim time is half a second better. Luckily, the BZ-75 has the same amount of gun depression as the other vehicles in this comparison of 8 degrees, which gives it a lot of flexibility on a ridgeline. Again, all three of these tanks go at 35 kilometers an hour. Their power to weight ratios are very different, however. The BZ-75 has a 12.6, pretty much the same as the 60TP, and really, this vehicle feels about as fast as a 60TP. However, it does have worse effective ground resistances, which mean that it ends up being slower on medium and soft terrain. And it may the AMX M454 makes the BZ-75 feel sluggish, with an impressive power to weight ratio of 16.88, which definitely makes the French Heavy feel more like a medium tank. However, the BZ-75 does have an ace up its sleeve, and that is that the vehicle has rocket boosts. And when it uses its rocket boosts, its top speed goes from 35 up to 52.5. However, it can no longer really go backwards, only at 1.5 kilometers an hour now. And the engine power goes up to 2,000, which will, I think, be the most powerful engine inside the game, as far as I'm aware, with a power-to-weight ratio now of over 31. And that will allow this thing to go up to its 52.5 kilometer an hour top speed on pretty much all of its terrains, especially when you start to get field mods, for example. Now, these rocket boosters, you have 6 charges throughout the battle, and each charge lasts for 10 seconds. And there will be a 5-second cooldown between using the charges and at the start of the battle as a preparation time. But that's 60 seconds of going at 52 kilometers an hour before you take into account field mods and a turbo. And that's because the rocket boost speed is not a flat amount. It's actually a proportional increase, which means that if you take a turbo and you take one of the field mods, you can actually start to get around at 65 kilometers an hour in this vehicle, which is outrageous. Another thing I'd like to mention is that 60 seconds of boosting. Have you seen what World of Tanks is like recently? Sometimes the battles are over within 2 or 3 minutes, and so you're kind of just actually able to boost around most of the times you need to move. And I really can't state how useful it is to have 6 boosts rather than 4, for example, on the Tier 8 Premium tank. 6 means that you can burn 3 or 4 getting into position and still have 2 or 3 left for later on for those special moments. With the BZ-176, if you burn 2 or 3 getting into position, you've only got 1 or 2 left to be able to use later on in the battle. And sometimes I feel that I'd want to burn 3 or 4 getting into position, maybe if I'm rushing the hill on Malinovka, and then you think, do I really have to save this one? Otherwise I'm not going to have any later on. I didn't really feel that at all with the BZ-75 on the test server, as you've got an extra 2 charges compared to the Tier 8 Premium. Consequently, the BZ-75, when it's not boosting, feels very, very sluggish indeed, even slower than a 60 TP. But when it is, it's more like a medium tank. But be warned that when you are boosting, your traverse speed of the vehicle goes down to about 4.5 degrees a second, so good luck, because you're going to be turning like a boat in that scenario. So now let's go on to the, actually quickly, let's look at the turret traverse. 24 degrees, not great. Hull traverse, 30 degrees, not great either. But now we can go on to the armor. And this is where the tank is impressive. 200mm of frontal armor, 110 at the side and 60 at the rear. It looks way better than the 60TP and AMX M454. However, it's kind of not really the case. If we take a look at how this armor holds up against the BZ-176's gun, which has 258mm of pen, we can see that the lower plate is an easy pen for pretty much everything. And even Tier 8 tanks are going to go through this at least half the time when they're firing standard rounds. Also, this vehicle has 3 weak points on top of the tank, so you're going to get to choose which one you want to fire at, because there are 3 of them. And the funny thing is they're incredibly flat. They're thick but flat. They're 200mm, but thick but flat armor does very well against lower tier tanks, but very badly against equal tier tanks and even tier 9 vehicles. And the one on the left is actually only 160, same as the one on the right. And so this means that even if you use your gun depression, they never get good. They're still at 180. It's amazing that they just because of how flat they are, just because they're thick but completely flat, means that they never have the opportunity to be able to ricochet. So these are really easy opportunities to be able to snipe. Another thing to mention is that the flaps that go over the side of the vehicle are 45mm thick. That mean that all 150mm caliber guns are going to be able to overmatch them. And the vehicle does have another issue, and that is that if you want to side scrape and hide the lower plate, then the upper plate remains good against standard ammunition, but as soon as the enemies have gold, then that upper plate is going to start to become a 50-50 chance to be able to go through. The other thing that should be mentioned is that there is an opportunity for very high penetration rounds to go through just to the left and to the right of the gun. If I show you what that looks like visually, it's actually quite surprising, because it's the mantlet that you actually have to shoot in this scenario, with only 330 towards the side, although that's still enough for most rounds inside the game. But why would you ever shoot there when you can shoot the weak points on top from pretty much every single angle? One advantage that the BZ-75 does have is 2,500 hit points compared to the AMX M454, but not as many as the 60 TP. Luckily, the camo rating is much better than the other two vehicles. However, it's still not enough that you would want to really take concealment on the tank. And the 390 meters view range is identical to all of these other vehicles. And with field mods, you're never going to have to use coated optics on this tank as soon as you have good cruise skills. Just before we go into the garage, I just want to highlight how similar all these three vehicles actually look. And I think it's really the gun handling on the AMX M454 and the DPM that makes that thing outrageously good. And so considering that the BZ-75 is kind of looking a lot like a 60 TP that just has less alpha damage and has rocket boost functionality, I guess. I definitely think it's going to end up being a strong tank, but at least from the statistics, not outrageously so. As this is a whole new tech tree, you're probably going to want to try and prepare yourself a crew for this vehicle. The commander is actually the radio operator, which means that there's a fair amount of pressure because you're going to want to have situational awareness, you're going to want to have recon, and then if you want to have fancy things like eagle eye and firefighting, you're going to need about a 4-skill commander here. The loader actually has a fairly low pressure on him. You're only probably going to need 5 skills for it to be completely optimal. So if you're going to invest premium crew members, I would recommend to put them on the commander and also on the driver because there's a lot of crew skills you want to take on this vehicle, including preventative maintenance to lower the fire chance and also controlled impact, as well as probably needing smooth ride on the driver because of the vehicle's horrible dispersion values. Equipment wise, I'm personally going to end up taking vents, a gun rammer and a turbo on this tank, and I'll probably end up having a second build where I end up using vents, a gun rammer and probably a durability device for those kind of close quarters scenarios where the rockets are going to be enough to be able to get into position and I really don't need that turbo. However, some players who want to enhance the gun handling are going to want to take vertical stabilizers on this vehicle, and some people will also want to take an improved aiming device because the vehicle's got pretty poor accuracy to begin with. But I personally think because of the way that the turbo scales on this tank with the rocket boost, allowing you to go 65 forwards for those 10 seconds, I think that this one is a great contender for a turbo, unlike the BZ-176, which has such horrendous accuracy at your tier 8 premium that you'd best do everything you can to be able to improve the vehicle's accuracy. Field mods wise on the BZ-75, I would recommend taking all-terrain suspension to be able to improve your ground resistances, improving the accuracy of this vehicle at the expense of the aim time. I'd recommend improving your view range by 3%. Next, it's kind of interesting, as I highlighted in my tank tree review, this is an assault heavy tank and not a breakthrough heavy tank like its predecessors, which means that it gets padding removal. Padding removal will make you more vulnerable to HE rounds and ramming damage. However, it will improve your top speed by 2 kilometers an hour, which is, in my opinion, essential on this vehicle, as well as the hull traverse speed, which I think is essential as well. Keep in mind that if you do take this, your crew will be more vulnerable, so you might want to end up using a premium med kit. And it also means that you will be taking significantly more damage if you decide to go for those outrageous rams. Finally, I'm going to be taking the auxiliary safety system, which will improve my module durability, as this tank was made in China, and quite often you're losing your ammo rack, your engine, or even more. But this does suck in a way because you are going to be making that horrible turret traverse dispersion even worse, so watch out. But I can't imagine playing the vehicle in any other way. Anyway, I think that's quite enough talking. Let's get stuck in on the battlefield. Alright, so we're rolling out on Malinovka, and unfortunately, for some reason, I've got a bit of a visual bug. Yeah, I am actually using the rocket boosters right now. It's just there's no fire coming out of the back of the tank. There seems to be some smoke from the engine. But do you see how fast this thing is? And look, we're going to be able to boost again immediately. We are making this map very small, ladies and gents, boys and girls, as we're going 50 upslope right now. And this is why I think that a turbo on this vehicle is essential for these kind of maps and these kind of situations. Because not only is it giving you that top speed increase, you can go faster than the 52.5 kilometers an hour top speed, but it's also increasing your engine power, which helps for going up slopes. And you can improve it with ground resistance improvements from that second field mod, and maybe with skills like off-road driving that will really help. And do you see, just we're in a position before we're kind of meant to be in a position. Unfortunately, yeah, the weak points on top of the vehicle are blaringly apparent to our opponents, and they're not catching anything. But you see how we've completely changed this map? Usually, we would be... Hold on, I'll see if I can show you the shot here. Maybe we're going to get a shot in the side. Yes, we are. Usually, we'd kind of be back here, right? Instead, we've actually managed to get forwards, and now the enemy heavies haven't even managed to get out to this horrible dip location where they're getting stuck in a crossfire, with me being above them and also with my team being towards the side. But oh my word, did you see how horrible that gun handling and accuracy is if you don't take vert stabs on this vehicle or an aiming device? It is truly horrendous. But think of this thing as like a hammer that just races into position. It's definitely not accurate. It's definitely not going to have the gun handling, but its shots still hit. Its shots can still be able to pick apart your opponents. And with not the worst damage per minute, if you're using a gun rammer as well, this thing adds up, and its 650 damage becomes apparent very quickly. Now, it's not going to have the rate of fire of an AMX M454, and that's definitely a different kind of animal, as we managed to try and get a shot here, hopefully through his upper hull, maybe for the weak point on top. Good luck trying to shoot that weak point, I decide, and I think I go after the T-57 Heavy instead. But it's just crazy how fast this tank is, and again, because it has so many boosts, this is what I was talking about, that World of Tanks is just getting faster and faster and faster, and wonder why it's getting faster and faster and faster. Because vehicles like this can now go as fast as Object 260s, or they can go as fast as AMX 50Bs, but they're not AMX 50Bs, they're not Object 260s, you know? They've got 650 alpha damage, and they've got incredible hull armor and incredible turret armor as well. And also it just allows you to make these push plays through tricky scenarios. Now we've flanked the 60 TP, but even though I flanked the 60 TP, it's kind of still ugly. I'm still taking big hits from him. I guess I could have tried to get my armor around. But you see how now we're up to 7,000 combined. Hopefully we're going to hit the Foch B here in their weak point, and oh no, don't quite manage to get there. But we managed to breach through that situation and try and keep it, at least try and keep advancing for my team. If only that 60 TP had died just a little bit quicker, then maybe we would have been able to continue through the woods. These vehicles really do, they surprise you. When I look at the statistics alone, you think, oh, it's going to be really slow, it's going to be like a clunky AMX M454. But you don't quite realize just how much of an advantage it is to have the rockets on this tank and what they can achieve. And just like that, we're up to nearly 8,000 combined. But unfortunately for me, yeah, you can't stop an AMX 13105 from coming behind you. And oh, I just managed to track him, trying to get my armor round against him. This game goes on to be a win. Fortunately, my team managed to go on to win. But I really feel like this highlights the BZ-75. You've got that speed to be able to get into the position first. You've still got enough armor to be able to block 2,500. Hold on, let me move out the way. To block 2,500. And then you've just got this gun that 650 Alpha still feels very much like you're out trading your opponents and you can keep moving in between your shots. And the DPM isn't horrendous like on something like a Rinoceronte, for example. It's just a solid bruising tank. And I really can't emphasize enough how much those rockets, if you invest them wisely in the battle, allow you to be able to dictate the way that it goes from the get-go. Alright, so now we are rolling out on Safe Haven, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to boost into position. And yeah, again, sorry for the visual bug, you're just going to have to use the indicator in the middle of your screen, which denotes whether we are boosting and how long we have to be able to activate our new boost. It's kind of weird for me that Wargaming didn't decide to make the boost preparation time longer, because it just feels as if, honestly, it kind of feels as if you've just got a travel mode for the vehicle that is limited. I know that you can boost for 10 seconds, then reload for 5 seconds, but for example there, we could just spend the 5 seconds safe behind a building and then be able to boost immediately out of it. Look, we're going at 64 kilometers an hour, and now 60 kilometers an hour upslope because of that turbo on this vehicle. And I seriously think that this is going to be one of the tanks which you might want to consider investing your best turbo on it, whether that be the Bounty turbo or a Bond turbo. Because while it's not going to be as impactful as something like a Stridsvagn 103B or putting it on a Jagdpanzer 100, because those things can't get mobility slots, I just really feel like every engine power will count on this vehicle, especially when you're trying to go upslope with those rockets out the back. Alright, so we've managed to put one shot into a BZ-75, another shot into a BZ-75, and that's because we've got into a position that heavy tanks kind of aren't meant to. And it looks like my vents on this vehicle, as well as me taking the field mods with the view range, is allowing me to outspot these heavies down below. I guess they aren't taking vents, I guess they're not. They haven't bothered to get a good crew, although maybe it is a test server after all. But I'm pretty sure that Chieftain has a good crew. Yes, he does. Of course the Chieftain has a good crew. But it doesn't stop him from being set on fire and roasted by the BZ-75. I just want to highlight how quickly that damage added up. Sure, we got to, I guess, continuously fire for pretty much a minute there on reload, but it worked. Alright, we lose our loader, I believe, to a weak point on top of the Leopard. Nice shot there. But, well, Medkit gets our loader back into the game, and the TVP is telling me that he's going to support me. So in this situation, this vehicle does feel a little bit awkward. You know, that horrible big lower plate. 8 degrees of gun depression rather than 10 that you'd have on the BZ-176. But 8 degrees is enough to be able to shut down that Leopard there as the FE-405 on our team removes them from the game. And you can tell what I'm thinking, that's right. Let's test the ramming capabilities of this vehicle as the TVP tells me to fall back. I actually missed, but I just rammed him for 642. If I'd penetrated that shot, he'd be down to a one shot now, but now I'm in a really awkward situation where I'm just trying to stop him from being able to get my side. Gonna remove the auto aim here and make sure I'm firing into the side of the vehicle. I'm hoping I can just get him a little bit more, but luckily the TVP actually helps me out, and I can turn my attention to other targets. So good stuff there. Shame I missed the shot, but wow, ramming for 642 damage there. I did take 313 damage when I rammed him, so keep in mind the ramming in this tank, especially if you take the field mod that increases your speed but increases the ramming damage that you receive, can be a little bit awkward. It's not the heaviest of vehicles. So we're loading an HE shell here, and I'm going to focus on the Grilla. You can see that I thought about going for the RT, but I'm happy I hit the back of the Grilla there for 841. But I know that's not the only Grilla around here. I think there's another German around in this situation, and okay, there's my final boost of the battle, and that's where the 6 comes in handy. 842 HE pen, and we ram the dude for 1,000 nearly, taking 269 in return. And just like that, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was 7,500 damage in less than 4 minutes. And that's what those extra rockets will enable you to do against those lightly armored targets. Spoilers, we don't find the RT, we don't find the FE-405. It's just pretty crazy. And you look at this thing statistically, and if you were to only look at the statistics of this vehicle, but not actually play it and see how it feels in the situation, you might actually think it's quite a lackluster tank. But considering this vehicle has near the statistics of a 60 TP, not quite as good at the statistics as an AMX M454, but if you set the vehicle up like that, you can do those 1,000 damage rams against vehicles that just can't really do anything about it. That makes this thing a terrifying prospect. I would 100% recommend to get controlled impact on this vehicle. You might want to even consider not improving the top speed limit of the vehicle so you don't take that 15% extra damage from ramming. It would have probably saved me, but you know, about 100 to 150 damage that I took in this battle that otherwise I wouldn't. But on the other hand, do you really want to go 2 kilometers an hour slower, considering how good the scaling is on this vehicle as well? And the results really speak for themselves. 1,800 damage dealt to a Grilla with only 1 penetrating shot. Sure, it was HE, but we followed it up with just that outrageous ram. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to be able to get an ace tanker for me in my BZ-75, even though we did deal nearly 7,600 damage and get a couple of kills in 4 minutes, probably because I was doing a lot of that damage at long range. The game on Malinovka was a win. My team managed to carry me. We had some good players in the VK7201K and also in the Manticore. But I did 5,000 damage and managed to get 3,300 assistance in my lifetime as well. And that pretty much sums up my feelings about this vehicle with my experiences of it on the test server. Now sure, everybody's a little crazy on the test server. People aren't tryharding quite so much. But I really feel that the BZ-75 is a very meta tank. Sure, it doesn't have the 10 degrees of gun depression and the big alpha damage 180mm that I was kind of hoping it might have. And while it undoubtedly makes the vehicle more boring than it possibly could be, I kind of see what Wargaming were going for when they decided to balance this vehicle in the way that they have. Because, again, the rockets, they're not just a novelty. Those rockets are game-changing. Being able to take that early position, being able to ram at just a flick of a switch against a lightly armored tank, especially if you've managed to get them tracked, is so game-changing. I can't really state it. To be able to achieve this kind of mobility on a heavy tank currently in the game, what you'd have to do is usually sacrifice all of the equipment slots. You know, you'd have to take fuel, which can cost you 10,000 credits a game, and use a Spowliner, for example, on an AMX-50B to be able to afford to take fuel because you want to drop the med kit, of course. And then you'd have to probably take a turbo on the vehicle as well. On an IS-7, lots of people love to use turbo grousers and a Spowliner so they can drop the med kit to be able to use removed speed governors on the vehicle. The issue is that the BZ-75 can end up being faster than those tanks, albeit only 6 times in a battle for 10 seconds. But it can take a gun rammer, it can take vents, and it can take a turbo, which will help itself when it's not using the boost, but also help itself when it's using the boost. And so it doesn't have to sacrifice all of its combat capacity to be able to gain outrageous mobility, because it's just like an extra tool that is in your arsenal to invest at the stage of the battle that you think it's going to be worth it. And while I still don't think the BZ-75 in its current form, unless Wargaming tweaked the statistics, is going to become the new best heavy tank in the game, I can't see it managing to just remove that title from the AMX M454 with its extra DPM and god tier gun handling, and the fact that when the AMX M454 uses its gun depression, its weak points aren't visible, but the BZ-75s are. I still think that this thing is going to be a ruthless competitor on the battlefield, and it has enough statistics in enough areas that this is going to be one to watch out for. But I still want to make my final word of this review that Wargaming has kind of missed out on something here with this branch. Sure, the rockets are exciting, and I guess that they've deemed that they're exciting enough to justify the branch in itself, but that lack of the 180mm, after a precedence has almost been set with the premium tank that went into the game in the form of the BZ-176 with its 800 alpha damage at tier 8, kind of think that Wargaming should have still tried to balance out this tank with the derpy gun. And let me stress, in a balanced way. In a balanced way. Because 75mm a pen or 225 alpha damage, it's going to be brutal against your lower tier tanks, but it's not that insane. And I think that, sadly enough, the BZ-75, outside of its rocket boosts, is just going to feel like another heavy in a world of tanks. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for my tank preview of the BZ-75. Really hope you enjoyed it and you found it useful. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Sunday, I'm going to be doing a whole Badger Tech Tree Showcase live later on today on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. So if you want to know everything there is to know about the British heavy tanks from a specifically not very heavy British idiot, then come along and I'll show you all about the super heavy British TDs. So really looking forward to seeing you all live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.